What do innovation professionals actually do? And how do they do it? How do designers create new products, services, strategies and systems? And how do they overcome barriers to make change happen? Welcome to Idea Work, the podcast about the people, skills and mindsets behind innovation. I'm Michael Walter, and I'm glad you've joined me. Whether you're starting out in innovation, shifting careers, or just curious, you're in the right place. Let's discover what makes ideas work.
Hello. So in this episode, I thought it'd be really helpful to give a sense of what the different design layers are. I know that often I have trouble explaining what a service designer or strategic designer does, even to other designers. I remember I was at a party and I was chatting with a graphic designer, a friend of mine, and it was really difficult to explain that, while they discover, booklets and the communication and the layout of, and, the layout of things and how aesthetic looks on a page, that you can also take the skills of developing those things and put them into developing experiences and services, like the experience of going through a bank or the experience of a client going to a hospital, like a patient going through a hospital. That can all be designed by a designer through the same sort of skills of interviewing and putting together things. So I thought I could explore the different layers of design. So when trying to think about a way of explaining this, I thought of two ways. And I'm going to start with one of them, which is this idea that design is like music. I'm a musician myself. I play guitar and some basic piano. And when we think about music, it comes in many genres, and there's also different instruments to play music. And so some instruments share frameworks. So we can imagine, I know it's easy to move between guitar and piano. So if you learn guitar, if somebody comes and teaches you a little bit about piano, you can do that. And that's sort of similar to in design. It's easy for different designers to move between disciplines. So a communication designer can, once they grasp the idea of service design, they can move across, and a lot of the skills they know from communication design will relate, because a lot of being able to communicate visually is really important in service design. And so it's different context, but they've got shared foundations. And they can move between genres. So you can have a musician who's a heavy metal musician versus someone who plays Irish folk. But they can still, if you get those musicians in the same room, so you get people like some heavy metal rockers in the same room as some Irish folk musicians, they can still jam together. They can still play together. So if you had an architect in the room with a UX designer, they'll still have similar concepts they can talk about and share. This idea of doing research before you do it, iterating, testing, visualizing. These are all things that are common across all designers, and they'll be able to share those sort of ideas. However, there are differences in the levels of skill. So just like in music, you could have someone who's excellent at playing Wonderwall by Oasis around the campfire. They're really good at that. They're nothing compared to, not nothing, but they're a musician, but compared to someone like Billie Eilish or Aldous Harding writing, performing their own songs, you can see there's a clear difference. You both say that the music they produce are great and good, but Aldous Harding is a cut above myself sitting around a campfire playing Wonderwall. And that might be the equivalent of, say, myself making a Canva handout or designing with Canva. I can do it pretty good and it looks alright, and I know some of the basic principles of communication design. But then when I think about some of my friends who are communication design and the beautiful layouts they can make things that look like something that would be published in, National Geographic or Frankie. They understand deeply the principles of design. But both are music. Both are design. Just like Wonderwall and Aldous Harding's The Barrel are both music, but just with different depth and craftsmanship. So when trying to explain the different things that different designers do, it's important to think about technology and how technology has evolved. And different design disciplines are older than others. So for example, communication design, it's also called graphic design, has been around ever since the invention of the printing press. I'd say even since the invention of writing, those monks who are displaying their text on a page and drawing the images and thinking about the layout and aesthetic. That was essentially design. It wasn't called graphic design then, but that is it. It's how things appear on a page, a two-dimensional page, and the aesthetic of that, and utility, and how you're going to convince people to do things, and empathizing with people, what people need. Communication designers are excellent at understanding how to make the complex simple. If you ever want to try and communicate something, you want to hire a communication designer for the page. So this is about fonts, colors, logos, layout, brand identity. So some of the roles in this phase are graphic designer, communication designer. This can also be, and I'll move on to this later, but UI and UX has a lot of communication design in it, but it's taking it from the page to the screen. Now, with the Industrial Revolution, we started making more things, building things in mass, so making chairs and tables and all sorts of tools and utensils. And as technology got more complex, design also evolved alongside the technology. So this is physical artifacts and tools. How do you make a chair that is comfortable, that doesn't hurt your back, and that allows you to sit on it for hours? How do you create a tool that's going to be able to be gripped so you can easily cut through wood? A saw that is comfortable and aesthetic and beautiful, So the evolution of design to things, that's product and industrial design. So roles in this phase are product designer, industrial designer, and furniture designers. Often professionals will be using things like Rhino, tools like Rhino, which is an online software to create physical representations of things that they can then send and then actually create in the real world. And this evolves into 3D printing as well. Actions. This is the next one. So objects don't exist in a silo. People are interacting with these things, as well as with the evolution of technology to include things like the internet. We were starting to design apps and websites, and this is where the field of UX design came along. And so this is around the processes, experiences and design of processes and activities across time. So encompassed in this field is UX designer, UI designer, and so the difference between those two is UX design is about the person's goals when they're using the website or the app, and how they best get to their task done, and empathizing with the individual. While UI design is around looking at the actual layout on the page and the functionality of the design and the contrast and how it looks on the page, and is it accessible, and making sure that that aesthetic is clear and able to be seen. It's UX is user experience, whereas UI is user interface. And often people who are, sometimes they'll be specialized in one and the other, sometimes they can do both. Whereas we know that people don't use websites and apps in isolation either. And so this is where service design came in. This is around encompassing all the previous layers into one. So what is someone's experience of using, say for example, Commonwealth Bank or a bank wants to really consider the experience of the customer as they come through the store, and what that 20 minutes would look like. As soon as they see the logo, which is communication design, they walk through the door, they hear the music as it comes in, they're greeted by the customer representative agent. That person says, take a seat, and they press on the app, and they have that whole experience. That whole experience of that, going through that journey, can be designed. And they'll use skills from communication design, making artifacts. They will consider objects that can be used to help that, the chair, the layout of the room. So the chair would be product design, the layout of the room will be interior design, and they will consider all these things and delegate that to different designers. And so that's actions. And then with the evolution of businesses and the complexity of that growing, we move to the design of thoughts and systems. So this is strategic and systemic design. So this is looking at policy and complex systems and organizational change. And we recognize that design can be applied here as well. the skills that we know from design thinking that we'll talk about later in this series and design skills can all be applied to understanding people and what they need, and how do we make these policies work? How do we actually make them so that they're not just sitting in a bookshelf somewhere, that they're actually going to be applied by the business, by the organization, by society? So that's where design evolves up to that level as well. And it incorporates all the other levels. Finally, there's also that parallel to this is this idea of built environment, so architecture and spatial design. I know that whenever I say, I do service design or I'm a designer, people always ask, so are you like a graphic designer or are you an architect? And I think because both of those are they've been around for a long time, that's the common understanding of design. But I hope that through understanding Buchanan's orders of design, these layers, that gives you a sense of all the different layers and all the different designers and how they all fit and how they all work together. So as we know, architects are about designing buildings and the aesthetic of the building and how it works with culture and how that interplays with people's idea of what they want to do and how they want it to look, and not just about the function. It incorporates function, but it's also about the aesthetic, and it's art really as well. Something that I thought about a while ago is as a way to explain the different layers of design, different designers and different design, outputs, is considering like an example of, say, a fast food restaurant. Let's say McDonald's and a visit that you might do McDonald's in one day. So let's imagine our user is Jerry, and Jerry is a student, they're working, and they get a notification on their phone. It's from the McDonald's app. And they pick up their phone, they take it out of their pocket, they look at it, and they can clearly see that they've got a reward, and they click the button. It's very clear to see. And they click the button and it says, you have accessed free fries with any burger you buy today. So there we have the experience of UX design. They would have considered that students at certain times of the day will get hungry, and it'd be good to send them a notification that would encourage them to come to our store. UI design made sure that app screen was super clear. The button was very clear and readable for people who might have a disability. The contrast on the page was clear so that he knew exactly what to do when he pressed that button, and there was no friction. And it's delightful. He clicks that and he feels delight because he's like, yes, I love fries. I really want to get this, and I want to go now because I know that it's only got 30 minutes. He's got to get in the next 30 minutes. So UX and UI design, as well as a bit of service design, would have been used for that design interaction. Okay, so Jerry gets in their car and they're driving and they go to McDonald's. They know exactly where it is because they can see the big yellow logo. Now that's communication design. A communication designer would have considered a logo that stands out. It communicates what they need. It uses certain colors that communicates hunger and relates to that, and excitement and joy. And there's a lot of work. McDonald's has done a lot of work in branding, which is communication design, with their advertisements and music and ads. So McDonald's is deeply laid in design. Okay, so he drives towards that store, he parks his car, and he gets out of his car and walks into the building. So the building would have been done by architects. The layout is very clear. It's got lots of windows, so you can see people in the kitchen. It's all very visual. The building has a very distinct layout, and often they look very similar, and they're very designed towards getting you into the store to buy the food, to eat there, and then go. And so he sees that online kiosk. He goes there and he gets the menu on the screen, and that whole object would have been considered by an industrial designer or a product designer. The fact that it's at a certain height, it's very clear, it's got a massive screen that you can easily press the buttons. An industrial designer would have been employed to consider that design and how it fits in with the room, and the interior designer would have been included there as well. So it's the fact that it's at a certain ergonomic height, that it's not going to be, you're not bending to use it. You can stand straight and use it, and people of different heights can use it as well. This has all been considered by a product and industrial designer. Also, a product industrial designer would have considered, after Jerry receives their meal, they choose to sit in and they sit down, and they only really want to sit for half an hour, less than half an hour, because the seats they're comfortable enough. They're not so comfortable that you could stay for hours. And so that would have been, an industrial designer would have considered all the different, requirements of designing chairs. There would be certain requirements from the government around legislation around design of chairs, and the design of things. And that person would have designed that to be comfortable, that it fits requirements, but not so comfortable that they want to stay for hours. Same with the lighting and stuff. That would have been considered by some, maybe the interior designer. Okay, so Jerry's sitting there eating their meal. There's packaging on the bag. There's packaging on the chip packet. They notice that there's a little campaign that they can pull, and they can tear off a little bit, and underneath it's as a reward. So that's both a product designer and a communication designer working together. And they see, I get more fries. And so they get more fries. They get it with the next meal. So that would have been a communication designer. The posters on the wall would have been a communication designer. The layout of the room would be an interior designer, interior architect. And so this whole experience of Jerry getting the app, pinging and clicking the reward, and driving to the store and going to the store and being greeted by the customers and using the tool, the menu, and sitting down, that would have also all been considered potentially by a service designer. They would have done blueprints and journey maps to explain how this could be the most delightful, the best experience for Jerry as possible. But McDonald's is a massive, massive business. And so they have customers, they've got employees, they've got shareholders possibly, they've got franchise owners. As you can see, it's quite a complex business that has many, many different levels of complexity. And so to consider that would, designing at that level would be strategic design, because it has interplays of all the different design levels. And so if McDonald's wanted to design a complex product, they might want to design a new training program that supports people with disabilities. They would need to consider legislation, employee needs, long-term rollout. They would need to consider the service, the experience for those new employees. They would need to consider that it matches with policy at the government level, what sort of support and accessibility support they need in the store. So strategic designer might be involved in that process, and they work in collaboration with all the different designers, accessibility consultants, and they'd hold that complexity while incorporating empathy and visualization and the communication skills of designers. So that's just one example that a strategic designer would do at McDonald's. Now, when they design it, they might employ co-design, which is a process of designing with the people that you're designing for. So they might consider getting people who have disabilities in to design the program and the training materials with them, and considering how they can adapt the McDonald's store to incorporate that, to be working with people with disabilities. So co-design is a process of really listening and working with the people you're designing for. Meanwhile, now moving on from that example, for example, with their materials, McDonald's might want to make sure that all their tools can be reused and not necessarily recycled, but be put into different materials. So this is this idea of circular design. So rather than making a tool that has a plastic handle and a metal frame, say the McDonald's, the chip maker, they might make something that's solely metal, and they have a glove that people can hold, and that way that metal can be melted down and used again. That's this idea of circular design. Now, if they wanted to transform their entire ecosystem, so McDonald's wants to become the healthiest fast food brand in the world, they want to make sure that they're sustainable in their sourcing and their menus and marketing, that would be systemic design. So it's another level up in the complexity. And finally, if we want someone at the corporate level who's considering how do all the different design levels work within this business, that's design strategy. How are you using design as a way to increase the marketability and commerciality of the business? And that's design strategy. So as you can see at the different layers, the different design layers work with each other. So a service design can work with a designer, communication designer. Meanwhile, a strategic designer can also work with all the layers of complexity below. And it's not that one is better than the other, it's just that there's different layers of complexity. And there's skill transfer between the different layers. A communication designer might move to UX or service design, and an industrial designer might move up to strategic design. And they bring all the skills from the different discipline to the other discipline. So I hope this is helpful in understanding the different layers of design and the different things that different designers do. It's just helpful to have some sort of guidance around that design has many different ways. There's many different things that need to be designed and different tools and technology. And as technology evolves, different designers, the design evolves with it. So I'm sure we're going to be seeing AI designers in the future around how do we design, and we're already seeing this, how do you incorporate and infuse design with AI? And as different technology evolves, that's where design will go.
Thank you for listening to today's show. Make sure you subscribe to keep track of all the episodes, and I look forward to having you here again. Have a great day.